The emotion you're calling love might actually be a demonic counterfeit so perfectly disguised that you've built your entire identity around defending it, sacrificed your boundaries to maintain it, and ignored every warning sign that what feels like the deepest connection of your life is actually a spiritual trap designed to destroy your destiny while making you believe you're experiencing God's blessing. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, there are believers in relationships they describe as love when they're actually bound by soul ties, spiritual manipulation, and demonic agreements that feel like intimacy but function as bondage. And the most dangerous aspect of this deception is how it uses the language of love, mimics the feelings of love, and creates experiences that seem like love while systematically stealing your peace, compromising your values, and disconnecting you from God's presence in ways that 1 John 4:8 warns against when it declares that God is love, meaning if what you're experiencing doesn't reflect His character, His holiness, and His design for human relationships, then what you're calling love is actually something else entirely wearing love's mask. If you're ready to understand how demonic spirits counterfeit genuine love and learn to distinguish between authentic godly affection and spiritual deception that promises fulfillment but delivers destruction, you need to subscribe to Faith Ablaze Network and hit that notification bell immediately, because what I'm about to expose will challenge everything you believe about your current relationships and give you biblical criteria to evaluate whether what you're experiencing is divine gift or demonic trap disguised as the answer to your prayers. The first shocking characteristic of counterfeit love is how it creates immediate intensity that bypasses the natural development of trust, compatibility, and shared values that 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 describes when defining authentic love as patient, kind, not envious, not boastful, not proud, not dishonoring others, not self-seeking, not easily angered, keeping no record of wrongs, not delighting in evil, but rejoicing with truth, always protecting, always trusting, always hoping, and always persevering. Notice how many of those qualities require time to develop and demonstrate, yet counterfeit love announces itself through instant connection, overwhelming emotion, and the sense that you've known this person forever when you actually just met them days or weeks ago. This supernatural acceleration feels romantic, when it's actually a red flag that you're dealing with a spirit that can't afford the time it takes for authentic love to develop, because genuine scrutiny would expose the manipulation, the control, and the spiritual darkness hiding beneath attractive packaging. So the counterfeit creates artificial urgency through phrases like, "I've never felt this way before," "You're my soulmate," "I can't live without you," and "We're meant to be together," before enough time has passed to actually know whether compatibility exists, or whether what you're experiencing is spiritual intoxication designed to cloud judgment and override the discernment that Proverbs 4:23 commands when it instructs you to guard your heart above all else, because from it flow the springs of life. The second devastating indicator that you're dealing with counterfeit love rather than authentic affection is how it consistently requires you to compromise biblical standards, violate your conscience, or sacrifice your relationship with God in order to maintain the relationship with this person. Because 2 Corinthians 6:14 warns believers not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers and asks what fellowship has light with darkness, what accord has Christ with Belial, and what agreement has the temple of God with idols, revealing that genuine love draws you closer to God while counterfeit love creates distance between you and divine presence through subtle compromise that begins with small violations like missing church to spend time together and escalates to major transgressions like sexual immorality, financial deception, or abandoning divine assignments because the relationship demands priority over God's will. What makes this particularly insidious is how counterfeit love frames these compromises as proof of devotion, making you believe that if you really loved this person, you would be willing to adjust your standards, modify your convictions, and reconsider whether God's rules apply to your unique situation, when actually Matthew 10:37 declares that anyone who loves father or mother, son or daughter more than Jesus is not worthy of him. Meaning if you're choosing any human relationship over obedience to God, you're not experiencing love. You're experiencing idolatry disguised as romance. The third hidden mechanism through which counterfeit love operates is the creation of emotional dependency, where your sense of worth, your emotional stability, and your daily joy become completely dependent on this person's attention, approval, and affection, rather than being rooted in your identity as God's beloved child, whose value Psalm 139:14 declares is that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and whose acceptance Romans 8:38-39 guarantees cannot be separated from God's love through anything in all creation. Counterfeit love makes you obsessively check your phone for their messages, feel anxious when they don't respond immediately, experience emotional devastation when they were upset with you, and derive your entire sense of significance from whether this person validates you today, creating an addiction cycle where you need constant hits of their attention to feel stable when Philippians 4:19 promises that God supplies all your needs according to his riches and glory. Meaning if a human relationship has become your source of emotional supply rather than your connection to divine presence, you're worshiping the gift instead of the giver, and you've allowed counterfeit love to replace authentic spiritual fulfillment. The fourth warning sign that exposes false love is how it isolates you from godly relationships, healthy accountability, and the community connections that provide protection through collective wisdom and spiritual discernment that Proverbs 11:14 identifies as essential when it states that in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Yet counterfeit love consistently creates scenarios where you pull away from friends who question the relationship, avoid family members who express concerns, stop attending church where spiritual leaders might recognize the deception, and gradually become isolated with only this person as your primary emotional connection. Because the spirit operating through counterfeit love knows that isolated believers are vulnerable believers who lack the protection that comes through community accountability. The relationship creates us against the world mentality where anyone who doesn't celebrate your connection is portrayed as jealous, judgmental, or unable to understand the unique bond you share, when actually these concerned voices are functioning like Proverbs 7:6 describes faithful wounds from a friend being better than deceitful kisses from an enemy. Meaning the people trying to warn you might be the ones who actually love you, while the person claiming to be your soulmate is the one leading you into spiritual bondage disguised as emotional intimacy. The fifth and most spiritually dangerous aspect of counterfeit love is how it creates soul ties that Hosea 4:12 describes as spiritual bondage, where your spirit becomes entangled with another person's spirit in ways that compromise your spiritual authority, contaminate your thought patterns, and create demonic access that continues even after the relationship ends. Because sexual sin and deep emotional entanglement create spiritual unions that 1 Corinthians 6:16 warns make two people one flesh. And when that union happens outside of God's covenant design through marriage, it establishes pathways for spiritual oppression to flow between people who were never meant to be spiritually connected. What few believers understand is that every time you engage in sexual activity or deep emotional bonding with someone outside of marriage, you're creating a spiritual cord that allows their issues, their demons, their generational curses, and their spiritual oppression to access your life while your peace, your anointing, and your spiritual strength flows toward them, creating a parasitic dynamic where counterfeit love feeds off your spiritual vitality, while gradually draining everything God deposited in you for kingdom purposes that require you to be free, rather than entangled with ungodly soul ties that feel like love, but function as chains. The pathway to recognizing counterfeit love isn't found through analyzing feelings, which Jeremiah 17:9 warns are deceitfully wicked and beyond cure, making the heart unreliable as a moral compass, but through biblical evaluation that asks whether this relationship reflects 1 Corinthians 13's patient, kind, non-envious, non-boastful, non-proud, humble, selfless, slow to anger, forgiving, truth-celebrating, protecting, trusting, hoping, persevering love, and whether it draws you closer to God's presence or creates distance through compromise, whether it produces the fruit of the Spirit that Galatians 5:22-23 identifies as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, or whether it produces anxiety, jealousy, control, manipulation, and sexual immorality that characterize counterfeit love masquerading as divine gift. Ephesians 5:25-27 reveals that Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word to present her radiant without stain or wrinkle or any blemish but holy and blameless, meaning authentic love makes you more holy, more pure, more committed to righteousness, and more passionate about God's purposes, while counterfeit love makes you more compromised, more confused, more distant from spiritual disciplines, and more willing to negotiate away convictions that once seemed non-negotiable. The question isn't whether you have strong feelings for this person. The question is whether you'll continue calling those feelings love when they consistently contradict biblical standards, require ongoing compromise, create spiritual distance from God, isolate you from healthy community, and produce anxiety rather than peace. Or whether you'll have the courage that Joshua 24:15 demands when it challenges people to choose this day whom they will serve and declares, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," meaning if your relationship requires choosing between God's approval and this person's acceptance, between biblical obedience and relational maintenance, between spiritual freedom and emotional bondage, then what you're experiencing isn't love at all, but a demonic counterfeit that has successfully convinced you that slavery is intimacy, that compromise is maturity, and that choosing God over anyone else is the real betrayal. When actually, 1 John 2:15 warns that if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in them. And John 14:15 declares that if you love Jesus, you will keep his commandments. Meaning authentic love for God produces obedience while counterfeit love produces excuses for why his standards don't apply to your situation. And the moment you recognize that what you've been calling love is actually spiritual deception wearing love's disguise, you position yourself to experience the freedom that John 8:32 promises when you know the truth. And the truth sets you free from every counterfeit that has been masquerading as the genuine intimacy your soul was created to experience only in relationship with God, who is love, and whose love never requires you to compromise your destiny to experience his blessing. If this message exposed counterfeit love you've been defending as God's blessing, and you're ready to choose authentic intimacy over spiritual bondage, subscribe to Faith Ablaze Network and hit that bell for biblical truth that breaks deceptive soul ties. Comment what country you're watching from and share this urgent warning with someone trapped in a relationship that requires them to compromise their walk with God. They need to see this before it's too late.